been convicted of a crime?
Yes.
What was the crime of which you were convicted? Did you in fact commit those acts?
I would invoke my Fifth Amendment right.
Privacy was very important to Jeffrey Epstein.
My sources tell me that somebody from British intelligence came through the vents.
Through the vents? What do you mean by that?
Through the vents in the cell.
Please state your full name.
Same answer. I'm Jeffrey Edward Epstein, and my residence address is 6100 Red Hook Boulevard in Virgin Islands.
Do you have any evidence to suggest otherwise?
The CIA was using children to compromise pedophile politicians.
Have you ever solicited a minor for prostitution anywhere at any time?
Again, I'm going to assert my right.
What'd you study?
Physics.
Mr. Epstein built little cabanas and beach houses all across the island.
66 different days that he violated his probation. He would go to the airport, jump in his helicopter, who knows where he went.
Yes, I report back to jail at 8 p.m.
Every single day?
Yes, sir.
Conspiracy, witness tampering, prostitution, blackmail, extortion, you name it.
Their goal is to cover this up.
Is it true, sir, that you have what's been described as an egg-shaped penis?
No, in fact, the Supreme Court recently said that the Fifth Amendment right is there to protect the innocent. So that's the way I'd like to answer that.
Talk about Jane Doe 102, Virginia Roberts.
What's the last name? How's it spelled?
Do you know Virginia Roberts?
So she's again who?
They're untouchable. So I understand people saying, why do you just go to the cops?
Prosecuted for these
Right.
crimes. Isn't that right?
They did.
Objection, argument,
Didn't matter. He owned the cops.
harassing, and calls for a legal conclusion.
Can you spell it? Can you spell it for me, please?
What is up, folks? Addy Ads here, Chosen One. It is the 20th of February, 2021. We are broadcasting. I am back in my home state of Wisconsin, in the capital of Wisconsin, in Madison. Don't have the highest tier audio today, but hopefully you guys can hear me just fine. Nonetheless, I'm on my traveling setup, so my audio isn't as good as it would be if I was in the studio. And just wanted to talk Epstein today. Going to be getting back in the Epstein flow here as we transitioned out officially the election hubbub, more or less, as the impeachment fortunately did not go through with all that nonsense. So Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, speaking of our former president, Trump being mentioned in conjunction with Mr. Epstein. And I also wanted to cover today some work on Jeff Epstein by Yoichi Simatsu, an outstanding and exceptional Japanese journalist who I actually found by way of investigating Professor Kawaoka, Ishihiro Kawaoka, I believe his name is, in full, in conjunction with the bioweapons investigation I've been doing. But Ghislaine Maxwell admitted Jeff Epstein had secret tapes of Donald Trump and Bill Clinton. And again, she is going to be on trial here in July, which is going to pop up, I'm sure, a lot sooner than we maybe anticipate. It's already getting towards the end of February here. Waiting trial on charges of procuring girls for Epstein to abuse in the mid-1990s. Again, I think she should have been charged with some sex crimes as well. Unfortunately, that was not the case. Simply trafficking and procurement charges for Miss Maxwell. And guess she was duped by this Ira Rosen journalist into confirming that the sex offender had taped not only Bill Clinton, but Donald Trump as well. I don't think that's too surprising that the mainstream is kind of confirming that, particularly with regards to Bill Clinton, a little less so with Donald Trump. I think certainly for some of the true believers. And I did put the entropy link for the entropy stream in the chat below. If people want to chat on there, you'll be able to see all the comments going in and out of YouTube, as well as be able to make a super chat if you like. And just checking, StreamYard has updated a little bit here, so I'm just getting used to this new UI here. But I actually want to get into this article by Yoichi Simatsu. And let me pull it up here because it's got some decent graphics as well. It really goes into the background of Jeff Epstein, charting the rise of Jeffrey Epstein as a government snitch by Yoichi Simatsu. And this is already 8/23/19, so about a month after his death. Exclusive to Rents, and he works for Rents among a couple other outlets. There is Clinton and Epstein, as we mentioned. An implausible account of the prison suicide of Jeffrey Epstein is being welcomed with sighs of relief by a Jewish-owned news media eager to avert another Me Too movement, this time by Goyim teenagers turning tricks for the predators in Epi's circle, including Alan Dershowitz, Woody Allen, Jean-Luc Brunel, and Simon Le Bon, the yet unpunished Yiddish creeps. More indecent that Harvey Weinstein, who at least returned the favor to his adult victims with high-paying movie roles. And I want to just reiterate, this is Yoichi Shimatsu's article, and I just wanted to share some of this. I may or may not read the whole thing. It's just fantastic work. I think pretty underrated. So continuing. And this follow-up to my earlier article on the Jeffrey Epstein Foundation, the funding of AI-capable sex androids and the transsexualism of the Victoria's Secret brand owned by his sponsor, Les Wexner. I retrace here how Epstein became a clandestine agent for the Treasury Department's Secretive Financial Crimes Investigative Unit, later called FinCEN, luring celebrities, politicians, and tycoons into honey traps in order to force confessions about their offshore accounts for the supposed purpose of tax evasion. Beware of official jargon with its presumption of guilt. The chronic unwillingness of the political class to balance expenditures with a reasonable level of taxation. Federal authorities and the political class have allowed the federal budget to balloon, which in turn requires an ever more devious and punitive taxation regime that invents new pretexts for government confiscation of savings and properties from hardworking citizens and bricks and mortar businesses, while privileging the unproductive and non-taxed tech sector for its surveillance role against the citizenry. The U.S. Constitution absolutely forbids these types of state-sponsored abuses. Jeffrey Epstein took an ambiguous role as both a stooge of the taxation authorities while enabling many of his friends to keep their wealth and evade unreasonable penalties. His notorious island was both a honey trap and a backdoor to the offshore banking services of the British Virgin Islands. A complex personality with a warped sense of justice, Epstein was a snitch, but also a warden who often let his captives escape the noose of financial lynch law. For all his violations against teenage girls, a rich man's world has tolerated far worse crimes of child abduction and pre-pubescent pedophilia, as disclosed in the Pizzagate scandal involving the Podesta brothers and other powerful figures in the Obama and Clinton circles. Yoichi Shimatsu continues, a lesser offender, tarred and feathered by the bent LGBT elitists. Jeffrey Epstein is a rather commonplace heterosexual who is both despicable and yet admirable for living out his notion of economic justice and dispensing voluntarily accepted financial benefit in consensual sex with girls who are at least beyond puberty. His misconduct, based on the Jewish standard of 13 years as the age of consent, was an affront to the puritanical values of American society, yet certainly not as reprehensible as the degrading perversions and gender violence that continues to go on unchallenged and unpunished across America. The relativity rule should apply. Why arrest Epstein rather than all the known worse offenders who have trafficked unaccompanied immigrant children and kidnap kids to their new pedophile masters among the Pizzagate crowd. Go figure. Again, these are the words of Yoichi Simatsu, the Japanese journalist, South Florida's swamp preacher, as he continues, again, just covering the recently released documents, which I will go deeper into this next week as I return to Michigan. And let us continue with Yoichi Simatsu's examination of the rise of Jeffrey Epstein as a government snitch. Before proceeding into the sordid details of this case, I should point out that Debbie Wasserman Schultz, look at that, DWS pops up, has been doing rearguard damage control by denouncing Jeffrey Epstein long after the fact, obviously to divert public attention away from her many prominent Jewish allies named in his little black book. Let's note here that prostitution on the DWS turf of South Florida, involving teenage white girls from Christian families, has been going on full tilt since the Meyer Lansky days, never before arousing her wrath against Jewish sexual predators in and around her own Broward County District. It's well known that the Miami region, that home away from Brooklyn, is a major employment center for young trailer trash masseuses earning large tips for happy endings with a shalom. Rabbis, if you're wondering whether I'm a new or old Nazi, the answer is neither. Just being a devoted imitator of Lenny Bruce, one of yours, writes Simatsu. Thanks to Debbie's moral guidance, nobody of social importance took any notice of the cheerleaders arriving at Epstein's door in Boca Raton, the Bay of Rats, other than his neighbor's nosy Cuban Catholic matrons, who considered the endless parade of scantily dressed vixens to be a bad influence on their granddaughters inside the confession booth. Due to the growing Cuban exile population, the ethnic demographics of South Florida has changed since busloads of Jewish retirees from New York were herded into Meyer Lansky's gambling halls, racetrack, and onto the bordellos and call girl services staffed with Southern whites. Epstein failed to notice the climate change in social values, probably because Joan Didion's Miami is not part of his personal library of 15,000 books, ranging from the Marquis de Sade to Henry Miller. One of the unanswered questions is whether Republican Ted Deutsch, former boss of Ratty Bay, intervened to spare the Epster a well-deserved chemical castration. Whoa. The Palm Beach County Police investigation began with a phone call from an irate parent of a 13-year-old girl in 2005. And within 18 months, dozens of other victims surfaced, as we know. Before moving off DWS, allow me a parting shot. Debbie, why have you never expressed similar outrage over the Awan spy ring in the House of Representatives? Plus, why are you on such cordial terms with Jeffrey's younger brother, Mark Epstein, on the board of the Humpty Dumpty Institute, which focuses on countries that have fallen off the wall? What about Seth Rich, who fell down on a dark street in the nation's capital after exposing your corrupt leadership of the DNC? Now go slither back to your swamp, says Mr. Simatsu to Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And again, this is on rense.com, RENSE.com, just something I wanted to share. Simatsu continues on, calls him Special Agent Epstein and speaks on his intelligence role, as well as Barr's father, again, being tied in to Seymour Epstein. So, and I want to talk about this because this is Jeff Epstein's father, and I've never really actually heard about him. In the post-war days, Donald Barr taught English at Columbia and served as headmaster of posh schools in Tarrytown and the Upper East Side. How and why would someone in Barr's prestigious position keep up in contact with an obscure schnook like Seymour G. Epstein? World War II history, as recollected in Catch-22, shows that Mussolini's Italy fell to the Allies due to the secret operation of the Italian mafia with the OSS, precursor to the CIA, as we know, in exchange for new business opportunities. The marriage of convenience enabled the mob to expand into legitimate casinos while restraining their traditional looting of City Hall, Parks, and Rec figures big in the latter as a jobs racket for the hiring of lower-class Italians and Plum City contracts for infrastructure and construction. The city's expansive parks are also where the bodies are buried. Donald Barr was born Jewish but converted to Catholicism, and religious affiliation was important for any secret agent operating in fascist Italy and Vichy France. Infiltrated or parachuted behind enemy lines, secret agents relied on traditional gumshoe methods since the internet and Wi-Fi weren't even in the sci-fi novels of that era. An agent's ability to gain the trust of the locals and strike up conversation were essential to spycraft and survival. Most former OSS officers retained their habit of keeping an ear close to the ground and quickly spotting and befriending the guys in the know. So he goes on to talk about Donald Barr and how he hooked up, possibly he speculates that he hooked up Epstein's father with a guaranteed job working at Dalton as a 20-year-old teacher, college dropout, to Epstein, or for Jeff Epstein. And going to HIV-tainted blood from Arkansas to Croatia. His association with Clinton got Epstein into the highest level of intelligence circles. Those Knights of Malta, an arm of the Jesuits, who ran a charity called AmeriCares, which used its cover as a major aid group during the Balkan Wars to smuggle weapons to CIA-sponsored separatists in Yugoslavia. Founded by Robert Macaulay, former roommate of George H.W. Bush at Yale, the AmeriCares team included former Treasury Secretary William Simon and NSA operations spook Donald Gregg. In wake of the Balkans interventions, AmeriCares focused on medical research follow-up to its secret air cargo shipments of Factor VIII HIV-tainted blood from Arkansas prisoners. A project started when Clinton was still state governor and expanded during his NATO military campaign against Yugoslavia. The infected blood was distributed out of Zagreb, Croatia, and delivered throughout the multi-ethnic Balkans, all in search of individuals with genetic-based immunity to AIDS, whose blood could be extracted for development of an anti-HIV serum. This goes to show the extent to which the American patriarchy have been closet gays seeking a remedy for AIDS, no matter the price in money or human lives. Again, this is Simatsu's words. Thousands of Balkans residents were deliberately infected to provide blood samples to Zagreb's medical university and largest public hospital. This medical black op is the underlying reason for Epstein to appoint Croatian immunologist Dr. Boris Nicolas, now working for Bill Gates, as his estate's administrator in event his lawyers are removed by death or a court order. In event of an executive order seizing his trust fund, the money can be transferred to the safety of a Catholic-dominant nation allied with the Knights of Malta. Let's continue, shall we? So he goes to talk about Epstein working for not only the intelligence, but the Treasury as well. Sometime around 1999, one of his many properties, lacking standard commercial transfers of title, indicating a safe house, Jeffrey Epstein purchased Little St. James Island as a honey trap for sexual blackmail on behalf of his bosses at Treasury. And let me just do that. Okay. At the time, FinCEN was quietly launching a campaign in cooperation with the British Exchequer under Lord David Sassoon, the scion of the opium traders, to uncover the identities of tycoons and politicians with bank accounts in offshore tax havens. Located off the east coast of Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands adjoin the territorial waters of the British Virgin Islands, a major tax haven with dozens of banks in its capital road town. The bilateral US-UK intimidation campaign was structured at two levels. American and British citizens were persuaded with hacked or otherwise covertly obtained bank records and forced to sign agreements to pay their back taxes and penalties at inflated rates plus penalties, whereas foreigners were to be excoriated in sensational reports planted in the global media by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, including Offshore Leaks, Panama Papers, Bahama Leaks, and Paradise Papers. ICIJ, quote-unquote, investigative journalists are central bank stooges, the media equivalent of Jeffrey Epstein, who have done irreparable damage to public perception of journalism. The state-sponsored scoundrels with ICIJ are, in anything, enemies of the free press. The state-sponsored assaults on citizens and foreigners for the crime of having a bank account were in violation of privacy law, banker confidentiality, and other legal protections of property rights. The irony is that the Anglo-American neoliberal globalists were attempting to impose their erroneous interpretation of British and American financial law to attack the sovereignty of other nations. Certainly any Western government involved in entrapment ploys and blackmail, especially arrangement of sexual services of minors, cannot hold up in a court of law. Therefore, the tax agencies relied on sensationalist media reports to terrorize suspects into caving into government demands, the Epstein arrest being just the latest example of state-sponsored coercion. The only legal weapon in their arsenal was if the sexual partner was underage or a minor. Therefore, a core of 17-year-old girls were recruited to protect the government in event of a privacy countersuit or in cases of mistaken identity of the account holder. Since the honey traps were set up for the benefit of tax collection agencies, the procuring of sexual favors was ordered by the government itself and not the fault of its employee, Mr. Epstein. The guilty parties in this state-sponsored pimping of underage girls include Treasury Secretaries Henry Paulson, Lawrence Summers, Paul O'Neill, John Snow, Jack Lew, and so down the line. Jeffrey Epstein took the fall for his superiors, who cooked up this idiotic, illegal scam and to guarantee his silence, had him rearrested and disappeared. Taxation is important, but not at brazen sacrifice of constitutional rights of citizens. The solution is to trim the federal budget rather than cut the throats of hardworking citizens. In this light, Epstein's crazed behavior in Boca Raton indicated he wanted to get caught to cause a public furor and expose the misdeeds of Treasury officials. Therefore, the massive news media campaign to discredit and vilify Jeffrey Epstein has tried to avoid any whisper about highest level official sanction of the crimes of the federal government against, admittedly, not such good citizens. Epstein liked to call his island Little St. Jeff's, and maybe he was right about that and quit the rigged game after becoming aware of the moral cost of American society. Jeffrey Epstein is a martyr of constitutional rights and human decency that would be unimaginable in any other time than now. An epoch of total moral degradation and diabolical subversion of the law. So play it again, Jeff. Every cop's a criminal and every criminal a saint. Pleased to meet you. I hope you guessed my name, because what's puzzling you is the nature of my game. So really well-written article, and I highly recommend people check out the writing of Yoichi Simatsu on Rinse, as well as other outlets in addition to that. And I have, pretty sure I put it in the description box already. So it should be in the description box. Otherwise, I will link it regardless. And let me just check out these comments here. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Gonna be doing some feet in the street follow-up for not only the science professor, scientist, who's working on gain of function, but also Mr. Epstein as well. Stay frosty, folks.